Hi guys, what's up? It's that girl cooks healthy. Today I'm going to show you how to make some vegan chicken, also known as air fried vegan oyster mushrooms. Yes guys, I promise it tastes just like chicken. You would not know it's vegan. It's super tasty, really easy to make, so foolproof that even your non-vegan friends are going to love it too. I cannot stop eating it. My family eat it so much, and I really just have to share this recipe with you because it is so amazing. So let's sit back, kick back, and make this recipe together. So these are the ingredients that you're going to need. So you're going to need some oyster mushrooms. You need oyster mushrooms for this recipe because these are the most meaty, meat replica type of mushrooms to use. So use oyster mushrooms. Don't try to use another one because as far as I'm aware, the oyster mushrooms are what most vegans use. They're really popular in the vegan community, so you want to use something pretty much the same thing. I also have some tapioca starch. You can use arrowroot starch if you want to instead. That will work just fine. I have some brown rice flour. I have some almond milk. Again, you can use another type of plant-based milk if you want to. Some lime juice, and then I have a lot of spices, a lot of herbs and spices that go into this. But you know, I recommend using all of the spices that I mentioned and not really playing about with changing it up because this gives a really nice flavor to our vegan chicken. So I have some pink salt, dry thyme, dry basil, paprika, oregano, celery seed, garlic granules. You can use garlic powder instead. It works out just the same. Black pepper, mustard seeds, white pepper, and cayenne pepper. The cayenne pepper I only add a small amount, so if you don't like a kick or if you don't want any type of heat, then you can just leave it out. So the first thing that we need to do is to make the buttermilk with the almond milk and the lime juice. So what we're going to do is just pour that into both of the bowls. So you want half of the lime juice going into one bowl and then the other bowl, and once you do that, you're just going to whisk it for a couple of seconds just to make sure that the milk and the lime juice is activated, and it will start to congeal and take on a different type of texture, and that's when you've made your buttermilk. And then once you do that, you just want to put it to a side while you work through the rest of the process. So the next thing we need to do is to decluster our oyster mushrooms. Now this is something that is subjected to how you purchase your oyster mushrooms because some of them do need to be declustered and others are already declustered. Mine were not declustered, so I just take a sharp knife, and then what I want to do is to remove the ends. So you just want to trim off the end part, and you also want to make it flat as well. I did forget to say that I've already washed the mushrooms as well, so I just lightly wash them just to make sure there's no debris. You don't want to go too hard with washing the mushrooms, because if you do, then they're quite fragile, so they'll start to break apart quite easily. But you definitely want to make sure they're clean. So yeah, you want to have your oyster mushrooms as flat as possible. Don't worry if the oyster mushroom is not completely flat. It might have a little bit of a curve or a ridge to it. That's perfectly fine. You can still work with it, but it's mostly for aesthetic reasons why people want the mushrooms to be flat. So just get them as flat as you can. The main thing is you're taking off the ends, so you need to just chop the ends off, and you're also declustering it so that you have individual parts to work with. So this is what the oyster mushrooms should look like. As you can see that they're completely declustered and they're nice and flat and good to go. So the next thing we need to do is soak our oyster mushrooms in the buttermilk that we made earlier. So what you want to do now is just add the oyster mushrooms to the milk. You don't really want to, it's okay if you overcrowd the bowl, but the main thing is that the oyster mushrooms do touch the liquid. So what I like to do as well is just to move the bowl from side to side. I didn't actually do it on camera, but you want to just move the bowl from side to side particularly if you have large oyster mushrooms, and that just makes sure that all of them are exposed to the liquid. And then once you do that, you want to leave it to soak for about 10 minutes. And while I leave it to soak, then I just start to set up my area that I'm going to work with, my workspace, and also I break down the spices as well. So while you're leaving it to soak, you just want to get on with other things. The next thing that you want to do is add all of the herbs and spices to a coffee or a spice grinder. And I do this because I want the spices to be quite milled and ground, and I'll be able to just add that to the brown rice flour without having any clumps or any bits, excess bits. So that's the reason why I add it to the spice grinder. You don't have to, but I personally prefer when it's like a powdery consistency when you add that to the coating. So it's something that is optional, but it's something that I do recommend that you do. So now it's time to add the spices that we just ground to the bowl with the brown rice flour, and you want to use all of the spice blend. It's going to seem like quite a lot, but it's going to make the coating more flavorsome, so don't skip any of the spice. You just want to add that to the bowl and then mix it in with a spoon or a whisk. And you, like I said, you're going to need all of the spice because that's really going to make the coating taste really, really delicious. So now it's time to coat the oyster mushrooms, and I have all of the bowls set up. So I have the oyster mushrooms in the buttermilk, the tapioca starch, the other buttermilk, and then the coating. So just grab one of the oyster mushrooms, then place it in the tapioca starch. And you can do this two ways. You can either use a spoon and sort of bury the oyster mushroom with the tapioca starch, or you can press and roll it into the tapioca starch. So you want to make sure that you completely coat the oyster mushroom, because this is going to give it the crispiness. As you can see, I just turned it over there. So I want to make sure that all of the oyster mushroom gets the tapioca starch, and then you want to dip it in the buttermilk, so the bowl with the buttermilk. When you do that as well, you want to just, with each bowl, you want to shake off any excess, so any excess tapioca starch, any excess liquid or the buttermilk. And the same thing when you're adding it to the coating. So when you're adding it to the bowl with the coating, you can apply the same method that I did for the tapioca starch. So you can either roll it or you can use a spoon. I prefer to bury it, so I use a spoon, and I also press down, because you really want to make sure that you completely coat all of it. That's really, really important. So this is what the oyster mushrooms look like once they've been coated. So this is what they should look like before they're ready to be air fried. So I've already preheated my air fryer basket. So the next thing you want to do is to lightly spray the air fryer basket. So I'm using a spray version of olive oil, and you just want to spray that evenly all over the air fryer basket. So now I'm just going to place the oyster mushrooms in the air fryer. Depending on the size and the capacity of your air fryer, you may need to do this in batches. So I'm doing it in batches. You also don't want to overcrowd the basket. You just want to make sure there's enough room for each oyster mushroom to air fry without overcrowding and being on top of each other. So once we add the oyster mushrooms, you're just going to lightly spray the top, and then when we lightly spray the top, you want to air fry for about 12 minutes, and you also want to do it at 190 degrees. So I'm just going to check on the oyster mushrooms now that we're halfway through the cooking process. So as you can see, they're becoming golden. They look a little dry at the top, so I'm just going to turn them over so they can cook on the other side now. And when I do that, I'm just going to lightly spray the top again, and this is going to create a nice golden color, and it's also going to help with the crispiness as well. So this is what the mushrooms look like now that they've been completely air fried. Nice and golden, crispy, and just almost foolproof, like chicken, like it's supposed to be. So once the oyster mushrooms have been air fried, you want to lay them out on a cooling rack. I also recommend eating them while they're still hot or warm. You can reheat them. Definitely don't eat them cold. So this is it, guys. This is how you make your delicious vegan chicken. I cannot wait for you guys to try it because you're gonna love it as much as I do. It really does taste like chicken. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you on the other side.